My name's Chris Adkin. I work for a company called Pure Storage. My current interest at the moment is things from the Azure Arc, well, the Azure Data Platform that run on Kubernetes, and as you might unfortunately be able to tell, I spend less and less time on Windows, since I've got a MacBook with Mac OS on, and I tend to spend a hell of a lot of time playing around with Kubernetes these days. Okay. So I appreciate you can't see my laptop that well, but what I'll do is I'll just pull it down, I'll go through the slides so I know where I am. So first of all, a big thanks to our sponsors of this event. Okay, and when I've done this, when it works, one of the things I like to do is to play this. Okay.
Someone should be with you.
Okay, so this, and people at the back might not be able to see, this is the Azure Marketplace. And what I'm doing is I'm deploying an Azure Arc managed SQL Server instance from this. Okay, so this is a bit of a, if anybody hasn't come across Azure Arc Data Services before, no, okay. So this is a bit of a teaser, a bit of a hook. Okay. So the question is go through this. I end up with an Azure Arc managed SQL Server instance, and the $64 million question is where is that instance deployed to? Okay. And the answer is, in this particular instance, it's deployed to a Kubernetes cluster that's running in my lab, or a lab that I've got access to. Okay, so to take a bit of a step back, Azure Arc is largely about Microsoft's hybrid cloud store. This particular presentation, this session, is on Azure Arc enabled data services. And what that gives you is, it gives you the ability at the moment to run Azure Arc managed SQL Server instances and this thing called Azure Arc Postgresql hyperscale anywhere where you can run Kubernetes. So that could be on premises, that could be AWS, that could be Google Cloud. You can run it on AKS and Azure, but there's probably not much point because the stuff it gives you, you can run natively in Azure without having Kubernetes in the middle. Okay, so the idea is to give you this flexibility to deploy Azure Arc Data Services on your terms. Okay, these numbers, these come from an organisation called Flexera, and they're just stats on why the hybrid cloud's important, why people are interested, why it's a thing in general. You've got this number 92, which is the percentage of enterprise organisations that have a multi-cloud strategy. 80% of organisations that respond to the report have got a hybrid cloud strategy. 2.6 is the average number of public clouds used across different organisations, and 2.7 is the average number of private clouds used. I can't get that to appear on there. I might be best just to go through it, because by the time we sort it out, I might have run out of time.
All right. Okay, no worries.
Okay. So this comes from a Microsoft marketing deck, and this is basically why Microsoft wants to do this, because what they're saying is to do this yourself, it's complex. You end up with something, if you're using something in Azure, you try to do it on-prem or somewhere else, you end up with things which look radically different. What people want is they want a common means of managing things like databases where they run on premises, in Azure, in Google Cloud, in AWS. Okay, so this is Microsoft's solution, and what you need is a Kubernetes cluster somewhere. Is anybody using Kubernetes, playing around with Kubernetes? Anybody? Yep. Anybody using double AKS, EKS, G? Okay, so the short version is basically, if you want to do anything with any containerized platform at scale, you need what's called a container orchestration platform. Kubernetes is that platform. There's other things out there, but Kubernetes is by far and away the most popular one. There's a vanilla version which comes directly from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation project. You can see this on GitHub. Or what you can do is you can use Kubernetes as a service in the public cloud, so there's things like AKS in Azure, EKS in AWS, GK in the Google Cloud. If you work for any kind of company in a regulated industry, bank, financial services, perhaps a government even, you'll find that they've probably got this thing called OpenShift from a company called Red Hat. In fact, if you are working for a bank with financial services, it's a pretty safe bet that there's somebody in your organisation already running that. Okay, so you need a Kubernetes cluster. You then need this thing called a controller. For those of you who've got really good eyesight, I've got this little thing with a sprocket symbol on, that's your controller. What that basically does is that extends the Azure control plane to wherever you're running your Kubernetes cluster. And then once you've got your what's called your data services controller in place, what you can do is you can deploy your data services on top of that. And again, what you've got is you've got Postgres hyperscale and you've got SQL Server managed instances to begin with. Okay, so Postgres hyperscale, a quick word on that. It's 100% compatible with vanilla Postgres, but it's scale out. Okay, you have these. You have concepts of workers and you have concepts of a controller. This is already available in Azure. You have to be a bit careful when you talk about some of the things in the world of Azure Arc, because some things are GA and some things are in public preview. So for example, right now at the moment, if you were going to do anything with Azure Arc SQL managed instances, Microsoft have done something really nice with availability groups, so that when a single command you can scale it out using the availability group replicas. Okay, but that is in public preview, it's not in GA. So word of caution, you need to read the small print as to what is currently supported and what they've rolled out, but it's in preview. Okay. You've got this thing called Azure Arc Managed SQL Server Instances. This is pretty much like Azure Managed SQL Server Instances as you would find them in the Azure Cloud. You've got fully automated backups. What Microsoft will do is, it's not there yet, they're going to roll out the ability so that it's updated automatically. Okay. It's 100% compatible with normal common garden vanilla variety SQL Server. Okay. This thing here, this comes from a Microsoft marketing deck. And what I've done is I've highlighted this thing here, Future Data Services. Okay. And even though I'm just mentioning managed SQL Server instances and Postgres hyperscale at the moment, What Microsoft intends to do is they intend to roll out a whole bunch of things to this platform. Okay, so even though I'm just talking about Postgres and managed SQL Server Instances, don't go away the idea with that things are going to stay like that. They're absolutely not, and it won't. I don't know what's going to be announced at Microsoft Ignite next month, but it wouldn't shock me at all if they announce that other things are going to make it onto the platform. If I had to guess, I would expect that Cosmos DB would be the next big thing to make it onto there. Okay, so I've got things like Cosmos DB, MySQL, Postgres, MariaDB, Azure Data Explorer, and a few other things on there as well. Okay. The data services control, like I mentioned, before you can deploy any databases, you need one of these. Okay, and there's two ways that you can deploy it. There's what's called direct mode, okay, and there's indirect mode. If you deploy the controller in direct mode, what that means is it means it's automatically going to talk to Azure and send login and telemetry information up there, which is nice, but it might not be what you want if, say, for example, you work in a bank, financial services, I know certain government departments like, I don't know, Ministry of Defence, for example, things which are very security sensitive. So because of that, what Microsoft have given you is they've given you the ability to deploy this thing in what is called indirect mode. Okay, so in indirect mode, you still have to have an Azure account, but the only time that stuff will get uploaded up to the Azure cloud is when you explicitly tell Azure Arc enabled data services to do that. The other thing about direct mode is if you want to deploy things from the marketplace, okay, you need to deploy the controller in direct mode. Okay, so elaborating a bit more on the marketplace. Okay, what you have to do is, if you want to deploy things to the marketplace, you need to register your Kubernetes cluster with Azure Arc. There's quick start guides how to do this. This is something you can do with a single command. Okay. You need to deploy what's called a data services extension to your Kubernetes cluster. Okay. And then you need to create a custom location. So one of the things that you can do is you might have Kubernetes clusters in different places, different data centers on premises, different public clouds, different regions even. What you can do is you can create a custom location and you can tag each cluster with one of those. So when you deploy something to the marketplace, you say, oh, I want to deploy my managed SQL Server instance over here, over there. You need a custom location in order to be able to do that. Okay, and then finally you deploy your controller. Okay, once you've got that, okay, you can deploy Azure Arc Managed SQL Server Instances and Postgres Hyperscale from the marketplace. Okay, tools. There's a variety of tools that you can use for deploying this. You can use the Azure CLI. If you go through the documentation, you come across this thing called AZ Data, which is based on Python. Word of warning, what Microsoft is saying is saying that you should use the Azure CLI instead of AZ Data. Okay. On templates, you can use those. You can use this thing called Bicep. That is, it's something from Microsoft. It uses a domain-specific language, which is anybody from Microsoft in the room? No? Okay, so I would say if you work for Microsoft, close your ears. the actual language that you use for specifying bicep commands, it looks very, very similar to HashiCorp control language used by Terraform. Okay, you can use the Marketplace, Azure Data Studio, and you can use Kubernetes native tools. Okay, so if you're somebody that's into Kubernetes and you've got a very pointy head and you want to use YAML manifest, you can absolutely do that. One of the things that I've done is I've created a bunch of Terraform configs for deploying these, so if that's the way you roll, you can do that as well. Okay. So I mentioned regions. The equivalent to regions is using these things called custom locations. I've got another demo here. I might just blast through that because I don't think you're going to be able to see it very well. Okay, so supported platforms. At the moment, they're the supported distros of Kubernetes that are supported by Azure Arc enabled services. You can absolutely roll your own clusters with Kubernetes. I use this tool called KubeSpray a lot, which is basically Ansible. If you want to do anything with this in anger, I strongly recommend that you go with Kubernetes as a service, so something like EKS, AKS, GKE. You've got OpenShift. Microsoft is saying that very soon they'll support this thing called Tanzu. So what Tanzu is, it's from VMware. So if you use VMware a lot, you like VMware, you like vSphere. VMware have come out with something which integrates with vSphere for deploying Kubernetes clusters. You'll see lots of people that do stuff, build Raspberry Pi, build clusters on Raspberry Pis, do them on NUCs at home. That is absolutely fine. But the thing is, if you want to do anything in anger, I strongly recommend you go with a distribution or Kubernetes as a service, such that if things go bang, you have somewhere to go. One of the things that I show people is Kubernetes has got a repo on GitHub. You can look at the issues, you can see what's open. You've got people that work on some of those issues. There's a guy called Tim Hockin who's a world-class Golang developer at Google. So Kubernetes is written in Golang. If you're happy maintaining open source, if you've got those levels of expertise, that might be for you. If you're not, go with one of these. Okay, so I'm nearly at the end. In terms of getting started, Microsoft have got this thing called Jumpstart. So what Jumpstart is, it's a bunch of repos and it covers all the different things you can do with Arc. This is Azure Arc Data Services. It covers a whole bunch of things. So there's Azure Arc for Kubernetes, Azure Arc for servers, apps for Azure Arc. Okay. For every specific facet of Arc, there's something in a Jumpstart repo, and the whole idea is to provide you the means of getting up and running as fast as possible. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
How would you phrase in one sentence to your Chief Financial Officer why you need a budget for Arc?
It's because it all sort of hinges on your multi-cloud strategy, and it varies from organisations.
So it's a member of large organisations.
Okay, so I would say the big thing is it gives you a cloud-like experience without being tied into anybody. Okay, the organisation I work for, we've got the best part of 15 petabytes of data in the public cloud. It's not Azure. We used to use things which tied us to that particular cloud. We got rid of those things which locked us in. As soon as that cloud vendor realised that we weren't locked in, they were very willing to discuss being flexible with our bill, which is off the top of my head, it's a six-figure number every month. So that's probably something which would make the CFO sit
So
on his
what you're
back.
saying, it's a way of running your Kubernetes being platform agnostic.
Exactly, yeah. And it gives you that flexibility. You know, it's yeah. And then there's other things as well. I mean, it's like data governance. I mean, we in my day job, we have customers, say, you know, people in Turkey who don't have an Azure data centre near them. There's some industries which just cannot put their stuff in the public cloud. There's people that have made big investments in other public clouds other than Azure. For example, Microsoft was saying that the first organisation to go live with this was going to be on AWS, but that's what I told you to begin with. That's probably the main one I'd go with. Okay, I think that might be me.